Yo, what's poppin' today? I'm talking about the San Francisco Shock being the last remaining win lossless team, rather, in the Western region at least, for the Overwatch League Season 5. And yeah, just like what just talked about the Shock today. So we're going through. So they've played Paris, London, Houston, and New York, only dropping a map to Houston and New York. So not the strongest composition. Houston mid. I'd say London's lower mid. They made London look really bad though, which is why a lot of people had them lower than they maybe deserved to be, and they showed that. So, and then they did drop a map to New York, who otherwise looked awful in the series, but ended up winning a map. Uh, so they dropped both their hybrids to these two, mm, well, Houston mid, New York bottom team, I would say, and Paris a bottom team. They made them look like it. And then coming up, they play against the Glads, which will be their first real test this season, I would say. We'll get to know where they really are relative to your Dallases, your Glads, your Atlantas, your Washingtons, your Toronto Defiant, even. And that'll give a really good idea. I'd suspect top four at worst, because I think this should be a good match, and I would definitely watch out on Saturday, May 21st at 4:30. This should be a banging game. And then the other game, the stage is Vancouver. So that's not. If they lose that, then stop being a Shock fan, basically. And they've been playing Kilo all of last week and Sam for the first week. I suspect they'll go with Kilo in the future because Kilo plays the soldier. Proper can play his stuff, and then he doesn't have to be on soldier. And you can see the damage difference here after in 44 minutes. Kilo has like almost double Sam's damage. Of course, he's on Soldier, which is like the highest damage dealing game or character in the whole game. But also 70 more elims. So Kilo probably having a better performance than Sam. Sam not playing bad, but he didn't play against the strongest teams. Neither has Kilo yet, I suppose. But yeah. So we see Shock just all these maps are pretty dominant. All these maps pretty dominant. Uh, on these ones, Houston maybe could fight back on a. They win Midtown, which I think I've seen a lot of teams like the losing team ends up getting a map on Midtown. I feel kind of often. Kind of a weird. I feel like that's the case. I don't have the stat, but it just kind of gives that vibe. And it was kind of close on Ilios. Houston could definitely have made a run back there, but Shock did definitely look better. And then against New York, they do drop the Kings row map, but other than that, they just do some winning. So yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about dropping a map here and there. This one could have turned out badly, but they pulled it back. And of course, it's Krusty. Krusty is still coaching, right? And Krusty, definitely one of the best coaches in Overwatch, and for sure is you're if you have a team with Krusty and you're half decent, you're obviously like in that top team. Honestly, even with mid players, if you have mid players but you have Krusty, you're like a mid high team at the worst. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look at how Shock have done over the first four games in all of Overwatch League. Of course, all of this I will highlight to. Whoops, hold on. Boom, green. So, uh, obviously, starting off in 2018, very different games. All of this, like this is Overwatch 1, right? Very different. This is quality of play and the quality of team, all very different. Uh, these two teams very similar, but it's the culture here in Shock. So this is the first time we've seen them not drop a map to a mid team early. Honestly, they lose the 2-3 to Houston, and then they like they go crazy, right? They don't win because Shanghai ended up winning this season, but they dropped the map to Houston early, and they're considered a top team as they go. Looking at 2020, yeah, 2020, they drop a map to Valiant, and they also win Valiant. I don't know why they play Valiant back to back. A little odd here. Valiant was a all right team. pretty. Yeah, I wouldn't call them a top team right that year, but they were an all right team, and Glad's were pretty good, and then beat Dallas, which is nice. But I would say, yeah, you do drop games to a pretty mid team, right? Especially early in that season, Valiant were not as good as they were at the end. They and then 2019, their first championship, right? They lose to Vancouver, which there was no shame in that. That was the runaway Vancouver. They lose to Glads, not a lot of shame here either. And they play this is a pretty hard schedule for the first four games. I'll be honest, but you don't look at this and you expect a top team right off the bat, right? You're not looking at this and you're saying, "Oh wow, this team's gonna win it all," which they do. But the first four games wouldn't have said that. And I don't think the first four games is not a large enough sample size ever. But I don't know, it's just nice to see the starts. And then in the inaugural season, they lose to the Valiant 0-4 right off the bat. And this team was Dak. It was I think they got Moth later. I believe they got him later that year. They had Nevix. They had Dante. They had who was their main tank? I don't remember who their main tank was because Super wasn't of age. Oh, I can't remember the main tank. That's unlucky. Safe to say he did not get playtime after Super pulled up though. I don't know why I don't remember that main tank. Hold on. I'm finding out live. If you wanna think yourself, pause the video, bruh. Oh, they had IDD QD. Know me. They had Know Me. Oh, Sleepy, Baby Bay. That was a team. That was a team for sure. Lose to Valiant, who was all right. I was a Valiant fan at this time. They were all right. Uh, uh, they were upper mid because there was way less teams at this point, so the bar was way lower. They lose the map to Shanghai. That's interesting. They lose to Philly, no shame, and then Boston turns out good this year. But that team, that Shock was not the same culture. I'd say Shock really starts here, right? This is where the culture of Shock, because this was just like building. This was like they were playing the long con in 2018. So yeah, they have not been off to a start like this their entire Overwatch League career. Next week, obviously, I've already said we'll show, but the first time you've been off to a win, like no losses in your first three games, even, right? Before that, they've always lost one of their first two games. This is a big difference. And this Houston and this Houston are pretty much like the same level, I would say. That means nothing. It's Houston, but interesting still. So yeah, that's all I really have to say. This Shock is looking. I like I don't know how to describe it, but they do look different from the Shock of last year. I don't want to call them better because that Shock team was really good, and it's way too early to tell. But they look they're off to a hotter start to start the season. They are more they're not there's no warm up. They're not warming up. They don't lose pity uh matches, right? They are looking very sharp. Um and that's all I really want to say. I'm gonna do a video about APAC tomorrow, and I think I want to do a video about players off to a hot start after like the matches after the regular season matches, but before the tournament maybe, or after the tournament, whatever. I'll figure it out, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, that's it. Uh, give it a like, give it a subscribe. Uh, Let me know if you enjoy seeing like this like brief history kind of thing for videos like that. I kind of like it. But if it's not useful, then let me know. But I think it can be interesting. So that's it from me. Uh, Deuces. Have a good one.